Well, hi everyone. Good morning and good afternoon. This is Scott King over at Zimperium. And thanks for joining me for some in-app protection use cases. I'm going to briefly talk with you about some of the use cases of when it makes sense to use in-app threat detection. If you have a sensitive app, of course, holding sensitive data, it has access to sensitive systems, and you want to protect basically your back-end systems from a third-party endpoint. So I'm going to talk a lot about that. When is security finished? Mobile threat defense needed. What are some failures? So we keep a collection of failures that we like to talk to when people ask us, okay, what can happen? And at the end, what do I do? So what do I do is really questions that you can ask your application development folks, your security folks, and your executives on how to manage the risk that mobile devices actually pose to your business. So if you do have a question as I go, please, you can answer it in the Q&A window. Most people don't like to ask questions, so my email is at the end of the presentation. You can email me. It's king@zimperium.com, KING@Zimperium, if you have a private question or a request. But I have a picture of a vault here. So most of you are hardening your apps. You are locking them down. You're doing obfuscation. You're randomizing code. You're hiding things, right? Because you want your app to be very difficult to be reverse engineered, because it does hold a function, right, for your users. So you do this, but what you don't a lot of times do is, if someone actually breaks through those barriers, do you have a system to make you aware of when that vault door opens? Or so if someone does actually tamper with your app, do you know it? Are you making it as hard as possible, or are you aware if it's happening? So just like we lock our doors at our homes, we also have alarm systems, because we don't really trust the door locks, the window locks, glass breaking, things like that. Brute force can get you in. So unless you have a system to make you aware, you're really blind to an entry. So security is a never-ending journey. So we will talk about security is not finished. Apple even last week said about iOS that security is a never-ending journey. We always have to stay on top of the game, because really what we're doing is we are exposing all types of systems, because we're pushing customers out to mobile devices. They've got mobile devices in their pockets. The customer experience is superior in a mobile device, and we want them to we want to grab hold of those eyeballs and hang on to customers. But this is a copy paste from a 10K report from US Bank, and there's a lot of words on here. But what I want to do is I want to highlight a couple of sections in here that you may not be aware of. In this section, you can almost find it in every single 10K, especially if it's a financial organization. You can find this in there. So now I'm going to read this. So it's talking about denial of service attacks, ransomware, and basically cyber attacks. And it says these risks may increase in the future as the company continues to increase its mobile and internet-based product offerings. So customers often use their own devices, such as computers and smartphones, and then the company has limited ability to assure the safety and security of its customers' transactions with the company to the extent they are using their own devices. Seriously, if you take a look, go to your own company, go look at the 10K and just look for mobile, you're going to find a section that looks exactly like this. Because think about what we've done, the infrastructure over the past decades, right? We've moved everything from in-house to cloud. So you'll notice that people say, we don't have, a high level of trust to third-party and cloud services. Well, a mobile is a cloud-only device. There's no wires hanging out of it. So you really have to pay attention to what the health of those mobile devices, and even the operating system. So we've done some research earlier this year. We took a look at all the CVEs that get patched in iOS and Android, And basically these are fixing bugs, right? So you can go look up the CVE data, you can look at the CVSS scores, and to see how severe these are. So in the first half of 2019, 62% of the bugs that were patched in Apple, critical. A critical bug that means that a remote attacker can inject code into your device. And mostly, this is via Safari or iMessage. There's lots of articles as of late, and even if you look into the Google Project Zero exposure posts and how iOS devices were being compromised, you can take a look at that. So really, really severe. So more than half of the bugs, somebody else somewhere in the world can put code on my device. Pretty scary. On the Android side, a little bit different story. Most of these are high to critical. So again, critical, I can inject code remotely. High is I can inject code, but normally I have to be pretty close to you. NFC, Bluetooth, same Wi-Fi, things like that. So what about malware, Scott? Well, mobile malware will constitute 30% of all malware in 2019 per Gartner. So you can take a look at the Gartner Mobile Threat Defense Guide, and then the market guide for application shielding. And what it says is mobile threat defense vendors like Zimperium offer SDKs, and you can add that into your application, and it helps identify malware man-in-the-middle attacks, because shielding alone cannot defend against malware or OS compromises. Okay, really important. So this is your vault door is shielding, and then the opening of the vault door is malware or OS compromises, because if you compromise the operating system, you own everything above it, including all the apps and all of your security features, all the native security features too. So mobile banking. Do a lot of people use mobile banking? I do. And I've used internet banking for years. I remember having 5 3.5-inch floppy disks sent to me because the client was so fat it wouldn't even sit on a single disk. So I had to upload 5 on my machine when I actually could insert a floppy disk. That was a long time ago. But mobile banking, so you can look through here, 2011 through 2018. More than half of the account holders in the US access their bank via a mobile device. So don't know if you do this, I do this. It's really convenient, especially if someone from decades ago sends me a check, I take a picture of it and deposit it. So you may see your bank here on the bottom. So this is how many millions of users these banks have using their consumer accounts. So you can the high number of users, 33 million-ish, Visa and American Express, 30 million, and on down the line. So maybe your bank is in here. It's lots of different users, right? So it is very, very popular, and it's pretty dangerous. So what I want to do is go through and show you how one of those global banks that is using threat detection, they tell us that we help them aid $1.1 billion of fraud visibility in the mobile channel. So they're looking at fraud in the web channel, the browser-based app, but they didn't have any visibility of malware and OS compromise and really man-in-the-middle type attacks that could attribute to fraud. So we're going to take a look at that. So what could happen if you don't do this? Well, Tesco Bank unfortunately suffered a really big attack. Hackers stole £2.5 million overnight by reverse engineering their mobile app. So basically what happened is the app was reverse engineered, all the APIs and credentials were exposed, and the hackers went in overnight and stole the money from 9,000 accounts. So this was a completely automated attack. The Financial Conduct Authority later fined Tesco £16.4 million for, and they quote, for failing to exercise due skill, care, and diligence in protecting its current account holders. So hopefully you're not a Tesco. That's been fixed, but. And then maybe you're into cryptocurrency. So the BitFi app is a crypto app, and they said, okay, this is unhackable, right? And what happened is they put a bug bounty out there, and people were very attracted at the bug bounty. So they hacked this Bitcoin wallet. Well, then they fixed that. Then they said, okay, it is again unhackable. They hacked it again, right? And they have since, this is not a very popular app anymore. But what they did is, they put all the security features in there, but again, it was hackable. So 7-Eleven, the same day that 7-Eleven introduced a payment function in one of their mobile apps across the globe, I believe this was in Japan, the same day somebody hacked it and bought a bunch of stuff from other customers using the mobile app. So they reverse engineered the mobile app, and really they found it because customers complained about transactions, and they had no visibility of this real-time attack when the app was being tampered with. So really, really dangerous. And it doesn't take a long time. Again, this was the same day. So mobile banking is a good use case. Now what I want to do is I want to talk about voting. So if you take a look at the evolution of voting over the last 20 years, if you're a voting age, right? So in 2000, we had the hanging chad. So I completely think that mobile voting is going to, I don't know even why we don't vote with our mobile phones yet, but so where do we go from hanging chad? So hanging chad was the Florida's manual ballot recount. So they were going to go back and they said, well, the little punch card functions didn't work correctly, so some of the chads were hanging and we need to count those. So they did not let them do that. So then a couple of years later, we had Help America Vote Act. And basically this was funding to update the voting machinery software systems. 2004, John Kerry lost, and he said, okay, I don't even really believe that the machine algorithms worked correctly, right? So he wanted access to that. They did not give it access to him. Jump forward a dozen years. Then we've got the Guccifer 2.0. This was Russian intelligence agency hackers breaking into the DNC servers. So if you remember that. And then Cambridge Analytica, which is the election advertising campaign. It's in red to denote that it's bad, but basically those guys were really good marketers. And then there's The Great Hack, which is a movie on Netflix. If you haven't seen that, please check it out. Then 2018, at Black Hat, an 11-year-old girl broke into an electronic voting machine that was supposedly secure. Took her 10 minutes. West Virginia that same year piloted mobile voting. So here we go. So mobile voting for U.S. midterm elections. And the pilot was, I believe, overseas military from West Virginia. So if you're a registered voter in West Virginia, you're out of the country on military duty, you can vote on your mobile phone. Pretty cool. And then Denver and Utah piloting mobile voting as well. And 2020, well, we've got our election. We'll see what happens. But I think mobile voting is going to take off. And so some of the other, what I'm going to call civic services. So these would be services that the government offers to you. And you have to, basically pay taxes and register your life away. This one is ICANN, State of Kansas. So they have an app that has, you can renew your vehicle registration. So I think this is pretty cool. But, down here on the right-hand side, it does have, your vehicle registration number, vital records. It says birth certificate, driver's license. This is pretty private information. This is information that you want to hang on to and not let go, right? So this is it's like leaving your social security card on the dashboard. Not a good idea, but I think this would be a good use for in-app threat detection, because if someone is in here and they're targeting an individual that lives in Kansas, I guess, but that would be a good use. I would use in-app there. And then Texas. So if you can, if you're into hunting or fishing in Texas, you can actually purchase a license to hunt or fish. So it has your license information, which could include, maybe background check information, payment information. So I think this is a good use for in-app, especially with when you buy a license, you get a certain number of tags, right? So maybe if you were an entrepreneurial poacher, you could steal everybody's tags from their license, maybe something like that. But this is a good use case. So it's got a lot of private information. I would definitely take a look at that. And then another civic service, this is an app called NYC Secure. NYC Secure is offered to New York City residents and commuters. And basically it allows them to be aware, right? It alerts them if they have malware or network attacks, or maybe if they have a vulnerable device. It says, hey, you're running on an old operating system. This operating system version is susceptible to these type of attacks, and then it makes the users aware. So this one actually has in-threat detection, in-app detection. So. And then the second section of, or the third section is what I'm gonna call productivity apps. So a lot of enterprises have apps that are not on the public Play Store. This one is, because I took a screenshot, but they're not, they're private, right? So they're basically using the remote workforce, pushing some type of internally developed app so they can do data capture. That data is then sent back to the office and it's crunched to do some function. So think about a law firm. Maybe a law firm uses apps for billing purposes, for reading dockets or laws, or there's all types of private information in a lawsuit, right? Attorney-client privilege is everything. Maybe accounting firms. So accounting firms, if you have consultants keeping time on a mobile phone for billing purposes and they're using documents, or maybe you have some type of field service that is a technician out in the field, maybe taking care of or building some type of critical infrastructure. So think about your utilities. You've got power, water, any type of oil pipeline, gas pipeline, wind turbines, something like that. I don't know. But basically something that would use a mapping function. So if you have a private map and the data in that map is valuable, wellheads or something like that, then you probably want to keep that safe as well. So any type of mapping or field service application, I would put in-app threat detection in there as well to make sure that no one is actually capturing that. Think about maybe even, remote healthcare professionals, right? So you can now buy a subscription. Instead of healthcare insurance, you buy a subscription to home healthcare, and they come and service you, and there's all types of healthcare information protected by HIPAA going back and forth between that device and the back office. Something like that would be a good use case. So what could go wrong? Well, unfortunately, the smartphones that we carry are connected all the time, and they know where they're connected all the time. So there's lots of instances where geolocation data was exposed. There was a New York Times study that they took anonymous data and they found actual people from the anonymous data. So you can be identified by your device just by numbers and patterns and behavior. So it's pretty scary. Another instance of geolocation data being exposed in a productivity app. This one was pretty interesting. So I use this app when I go ride my bike. This is Strava. So Strava is a productivity app. It basically maps and keeps up with your either running or cycling or swimming, and it creates a map of your route, and it sends that data up to Strava. But what Strava did was they basically thought it was really neat art project and published these global heat maps. But what happened is someone that was looking at these global heat maps that were published that were private, in-app data, but it's on the internet. And then someone said, hey, look, here on the left, this is a secret military base. So basically the soldiers, on their off time, their exercise time, they're jogging around. Well, they're creating a perfect map of the military base that is not listed anywhere else. Pretty scary. And on the right, this is a Strava. You can't really see the black outline, but this is a cyclist at Area 51. So they normally would mask data from satellite imagery that flew over Area 51, but here you can see it, and this cyclist just riding around. So that's pretty neat. So I would definitely hold that close to the chest. And another is, think about some of the apps. This one is a photo editing app. This was pretty dangerous. It wasn't tampered with, but it was leaking a lot of data, and the photo editing app was actually sending it all to China. So you can go to those 2 IP addresses there, and that's where all the user data was headed. So completely malicious in nature. I would definitely take a look at some in-app threat detection for that, right? Because what's going to happen is they're going to capture user data, and then they're going to use that for other purposes. So the mobile data is not always looking to be the end goal, right? Maybe it's a piece of the puzzle. So take a look at that. So how does this work? So right now what I'm going to do is I'll tell you a little bit how this works, how it's deployed, and then give you some examples, some workflow examples of what the data on the back end looks like. So in-app threat detection and remediation, basically what happens is you can't really remediate one of these attacks if you're not looking for it. So we teach you and enable you how to look for it. And these are malware pieces, both unknown and known. So known malware, easy fix. Unknown malware, not so easy. So you need to be able to look at the OS vulnerabilities as well. So what does a 0-day attack look like? Things like that. And then how risky is the configuration of the device? So remember earlier when I talked about US Bank and they said, hey, we really don't know what's going on with these third-party devices. We're going to give you visibility into that configuration risk so you can make decisions like on the right that says, okay, if they have malware on the device, maybe I don't even want them using my app. Or, if it's jailbroken, or if they're attacked over the network, or if they have some other kind of configuration risk, maybe I don't want them to be able to pay bills on my mobile banking app or something like that. Whatever it is, your business case will decide how you're going to remediate that, but you have to have visibility into it first. So what does that look like? So let's detect some malware. So let's say, for instance, a user logs into mobile banking, and I already have the in-app threat detection on here, the little tiny box in the left-hand corner of the device is with the Z. So Zimperium is going to scan the device for malware at login. If malware is present, it basically logs this and says, hey, this user is present, they have malware, and then healthy devices can proceed to the next step. They said, okay, if malware, no. If no malware, go ahead. And then basically eliminating malware reduces fraud risk. So malware is going to push different information to your device. It's going to pull information from your device, use the processor of your device, what have you, or try to steal your credentials. So there's a pretty famous malware on Android called BankBot. The second version can actually capture the SMS authentication codes heading back to you. So even if you have multi-factor, the guys that have written that malware have captured SMS. So interestingly, the ROI on banking malware and banking attacks, it's about 600% ROI. So it's well worth a cyber criminal's effort. So at Global Bank, when they took a look at malware in their in their channel. So they identified 2,200 malicious apps almost immediately. So once they updated their consumer app, what happens is the in-app threat detection said, hey, these 2,200 malicious apps on tens of thousands of devices, this is all malware. So you may want to take a look at, maybe either warn those users or just monitor them, right? We're not going to turn the users off because we want them to interact with us. So it's always kind of a customer first methodology, because the customer experience on mobile is superior. So you don't really want to degrade the customer experience, but what you do want is visibility into what's going on into those third-party devices. Okay, so now we're going to detect Wi-Fi attacks. And so I don't want a Wi-Fi attack because I want to keep my money, right? So again, user logs into mobile banking and someone is sitting near me, can grab my traffic. This is pretty easy. Spend $100 on Amazon and you can get that done. And then the device actually says, hey, you are under attack. Someone is capturing your traffic while you're banking. And if so, then we can remediate. So if there's a man-in-the-middle attack picked up, I can remediate, or I don't do anything. I just monitor that user, that device, that account for fraud. So maybe I keep an eye on it, right? So all the different fraud systems and fraud logic that you have in the back end runs as normal. Basically, we're just feeding it additional data from the mobile channel, right? So you don't really have this visibility right now. You're trying to capture these attacks by looking at the behavior of something else. But if you can just have visibility into that third-party endpoint, you can take a look at and capture data on that behavior earlier, so you can cut it off. So again, our global bank that does reduce fraud in their mobile channel, they found that their users were, inside of 30 days, were using 3,000 compromised networks. So these aren't networks with just no password, right? So those are everywhere. These are compromised networks, really, really dangerous. So if you are, if you're out conducting business and you're doing a large transaction and you're paying your whatever you guys pay for, you might want to look at where you're actually conducting that business. Make sure that you're on a good network. And if you don't know, then this is how you get the data about that network. So silent day exploits or compromises. So jailbreak detection, easy to detect, right? I call the system, is jailbroken? No, proceed. 0 day, really, really hard to identify. So is the device that your customer using, is it vulnerable or is it already compromised? Okay, so we're going to log into mobile banking again. When we log in, Zimperium is going to scan the operating system for vulnerabilities at login. Okay, so we can take a look at apps on Android as well for unknown malware. Take a look at that. And then if the device is considered vulnerable or it poses any risk, well, you can do something about it. Here's our fraud logic again, right? So you can do nothing and monitor this device or consumer or account, right? You guys are looking at, you can identify when a customer gets a new device. That's a fraud rule. And geolocation. So you're already looking at, okay, is this normal behavior? But if if I'm inside the confines of normal behavior, it is my device and it is kind of in the zip code where I normally do banking, but it's compromised, then your fraud rule is no good and you can't see it. So you can put those type of remediation policies in place and proceed. So what happens if you start doing this? Well, this same bank that installed in-app protection into their banking app found that out of their device inventory of all their consumers, there were 1,200 compromised devices. Now there were 100,000 jailbroken devices. That's different, right? That's what a user does. a user jailbreaks or roots his device to do some function that he wants to do. Either he's a developer or she is a developer, and they want to enable some features that are outside of norm, right? That are outside of standard functions, and they use developer options, or you know, I want to break out and go get, you know, third-party apps. In the U.S., not so much. In other parts of the world, there are more third-party app stores. But a compromised device is something that somebody else does to your device and you don't know it. So that's pretty dangerous. So without the visibility into compromised devices, they're in your network. They're connecting to you. You just don't know who they are. So without the visibility into those compromised devices, you don't have any way to defend yourself from that thing interacting with you. So here are some questions to take away, and these are the questions that you can ask your peers, your application development, your security folks about operational risk of these third-party endpoints. So ask them, like, okay, theoretically, how risky is the device in this environment? On the device OS, how risky is it? Okay, could you give it a score? Is there malware on the device? So Gartner says that 30% of all malware is going to be on mobile. Like, do you know how much malware are on your mobile devices connecting to you? And then the network, we talked about that. Is the network where you're doing your business, is it safe or not? Okay. Is there something else running on the device that is abnormal? Is it looking into memory? Is it stealing confidential data? Is it exporting data to remote locations? You know, is there something looking at my keystrokes or the pasteboard data? This one is really scary. So there are apps actually monitoring your pasteboard data. So if you copy and paste something from one place to another on your device, you know, think about a complicated password. You can't type in a password from LastPass or a suggested password from your keychain because it's really long, it's really complicated, so you copy paste it. There are apps on your device that actually know when you do that and they record that. And is the device jailbroken or compromised? Most of you are already doing this, and keep doing that, but take a look at some of the other functions and some of the other data feeds that you could actually get to increase your fraud detection. So that is all I have today. If you do have a private question that you would like to ask or some type of request on maybe some more detail, you can send me an email at king@zimperium.com. And I hope you enjoyed our presentation today, and have a great rest of the day. Bye now.